teaching and learning is like a boxing match. It has to be in person. It is not top down. This is why I urge you to speak up. When you speak up and when you act alive, I learn, and I'm kept alive in my own mind, Otherwise, it's just, I don't know, I don't want to think about the otherwise. In this course, in addition to figuring out that you as engineering students have a much better feel for how nature works, or said the other way, nature has a very good feel about how engineering works. In addition to that, there is, if you pay attention, there's a string of hints about hints that may be useful to you in your careers. And today's lecture begins with a couple of those hints. First, the previous lecture ended with a hint at your power to predict the evolution of technology. Evolution of technology. And we had on the blackboard the performance per unit volume of cooling by conduction. So that was conduction. And I sketched that, yes, we are able to predict in retrospect that before conduction was forced convection cooling. And even older than forced convection was natural convection cooling. Today is a fork in the road, not because there is this fork in the road in the textbook, and the textbook is heavy with configurations for cooling and heating and all these things, all the way to chapter 10. So instead of showing you these two older and less potent methods of sucking heat out of a solid, I decided to share with you my feeling that I was getting bored with the cooling of things. And in my career, I learned that the way to go forward, not only in terms of speed, but especially in terms of happiness, is to change tracks, at least for a while. So today, I will ask you to think about something different, something that's not in the textbook, and then we'll return to this thread a little bit later, when everybody is fresh and eager to reconnect with his and her past. So that's the first message. The second is that technology evolution, in retrospect, is pretty obvious. Today is not what this place, Earth itself, used to be. And life is a lot easier. If you remember your grandparents, they'll tell you about that. If you read history, you'll be horrified, and then you'll remember that. Things were much worse, and in many ways. And so technology evolution empowers people, makes things easier. Movement for sure, communication obviously, food is cheaper per unit, all these things. And the easy, which is the one word for these better things, is at once seductive and addictive. My to all of you today is that although the easy is attractive, the more difficult never disappears. And so the path forward, and this is good to know if you are in business and technology and entrepreneurship is that old techniques will always be around, but they'll be in the hands or minds of a few, as opposed to the new, the easy, which are adopted by larger and larger groups, not as well equipped with fundamentals as the few who still juggle the old. So this sort of combination of easy and difficult is another version of diversity happening naturally. I have several examples. In fact, if you scratch your heads, you'll come up with 10 additional examples. One is, let me see the first one. Yeah, photography. In the mid-1800s, when it was invented, people became instantly, let's say, happy because they could take pictures, but also worried that hand painting would disappear. A lot of this hand painting was a business about making portraits. You know, people who had some money paid for portraits of members of their family. If you look at books of history, you see portraits of all these folks from the early 1800s, also 1700s and earlier. Those were commissioned. You see, it was a business. And well, photography arrived. Everybody is now making portraits of themselves and the family and many other things. And but painting did not disappear. In fact, the few and fewer good painters became more and more valuable, more coveted, and yes, more affluent, not to mention more famous. Even those who were not drawing very well, like Picasso, became irreplaceable, you see. You say inimitable, is that the word? I think that's what it is. So that's what happens to the old. The old, just like the old wine, is less and less plentiful, but more and more valuable. The second example, the steam locomotive. Railroads invaded the world in the second half of the 1800s and set the world in motion on land, but also on the ocean, because now you had steamships as opposed to relying on the wind. And but the steam locomotive did not put the horse and the buggy out of business. To this day, the horse, and the name is chariot, is extremely valuable. Go and watch harness racing. You'll see it there in not only in action, but on the edge of defeating nature or teasing nature, because the rider has trained the horse to trot at a high speed, where it is a lot more economical for the horse to gallop. So the old technology continues to teach the observant important lessons forever. The other example I have is software. You push a button and you solve with that algebraic equations, differential equations, also integral calculus. That thing liberated your generation. It also liberated the older generation, meaning the folks who are weak in mathematics. But this new technology did not put out of business the few who still know how to do math by hand. Ironically, at the same time, this change elevated to undeserved heights the few who knew how to do math by hand, who are basically incapable of questioning what Euler and Lagrange did, and even less capable of doing the kind of innovative math that those folks produced. You see that? So going forward, you and your pals in life would do better if you are aware of both sources of power. And finally is this emailing. Emailing is a lot easier than picking up the phone and talking to somebody. And relative to those, much more difficult is to write a letter by hand and lick a stamp and walk to the post office. But all these techniques, the easy, the medium, and the most difficult, will always be with us for the reasons that I mentioned. Incidentally, do you know when the post office was invented? And by whom? You don't know? Listen, what you learn here is it's good to ask these questions, and if you don't know, you don't trust Wikipedia, but that's one place to start. Yes. So who are the world's first and greatest and most impactful explorers who actually went exploring on the sea with that purpose of exploring, going and discovering stuff that nobody knew about? Don't tell me Columbus, because that was a shot in the dark, which happened earlier. The Portuguese, the king of Portugal, this is a small country, in order to figure out a way to make Portugal more rich, in spite of its small punch, invested in the technology of shipbuilding, the science of that, and making ships, and training sailors to sail long distance. They are the ones that navigated south around the African continent, turned the corner at the Cape of Good Hope, and then went on all the way to Japan. Discovered Taiwan, which they call Formosa, which means beautiful in Latin, and all that, and they conducted trade. They brought gunpowder was invented in China, but the armament, the rifle, all these things came from the West, and they figured out that the way to improve this kind of flow was for ships that were going east to deposit their letters for home, deposit them in a box in a place called Cape Town today. And then ships that were returning from the east and going to Portugal would pick up these letters and deliver them to addresses in Portugal. Get it? So when we hear of Cape Town, think about centuries ago how that spot became important. And by the way, and how Europeans found out about Cape Town, what happened in Europe at about the same time was the persecution of the Protestants, and especially in France. The Huguenots, they ran to Holland, and in Holland they were not accepted very happily. And the same Huguenots, winemakers, then went on those ships to Cape Town and founded today's very famous South African wine industry. See that? One technology called mailing led to all sorts of things, including what I just told you about. In fact, you'll remember my story about the post office when you drink South African wine.